Ever since I listened to an audio lecture series by Professor Goldman, I've been awakened to the truths that can be often found in mythology and superstition. It is by going through historical accounts and books that have been written in the past that you can sift through and find truth as it applies to you and what your knowledge base is. In researching past accounts and stories that people who have come before have left behind on the process of connecting to the elements, connecting to energy, I came across quite a few different stories, including old myths and very much the way people projected their belief systems on what they were witnessing at the time. I'd like to read from an encyclopedia on this subject, which is rich in stories and accounts. Elementary spirits, the unseen intelligences who inhabit the four elements of the finest essence of which they are composed. The creatures of the air are called sylphs, of the earth, gnomes, of fire, salamanders, and of water, nymphs or undines. The best authority on the subject is Abbé de Villars, who published early in the 18th century a short treatise called Comte de Gabalis, from which a good deal of what follows is drawn. According to this work, the creatures of the elements were before the fall subject to Adam in all things, and we are led to understand that by means of certain performances this ancient communication may be restored, and that man may once more have at his beck and call the elementary spirits. Moving along a little bit more into the account, the sylphs are composed of the motions of nature. Moving along to later in the account, the sylphs are composed of the purest atoms of air, the nymphs of the most delicate particles of water, and the gnomes of the finest essence of earth. Adam was in complete accord with these creatures because, being composed of that which was purest in the four elements, he contained in himself the perfections of these four peoples, and was their natural king. Now, as I said before, we are looking for clues. We're looking for things that can help us in our own training. Now, when I read about elementals and intelligences within the elements, I think about my own experiences with PK. And in those experiences, I have found that I can project my own intelligence and connect with almost a completely connected intelligence. And when I read these stories, I often think or wonder if people themselves projected a superstitious idea that this intelligence or these intelligences were separate from themselves, external. Now, anyone who has kept current with the more recent investigations by certain research societies into the creation of fictional yet physically present entities will know that a human consciousness can create an effect outside of his body with personality. The Tibetans would refer to these mind constructs as tulpas. It's a very interesting subject to research, but the more I look into this, the more I think that when these people were experiencing these events, or they were passing down these stories, that they were putting their own spin on it, or their own outlook, their own beliefs, their own superstition. Much in the same way that I am now. I am using this information as it applies to my beliefs, and for you, you will use this information as it applies to your information and your beliefs. But what I find interesting is that as you read on, it talks about how, and I'll read it out. Eliphas Levi, for instance, states that anyone desirous of subjugating the elementals must first perform the 4 trials of antique initiation. But as the original trials are no longer known, similar ones must be substituted. Thus, he who would control the sylphs must walk fearlessly on the edge of a precipice. He who would win the service of the salamanders must take his stand in a burning building, and so on. The point of the ordeals being that the man should show himself unafraid of the elements whose inhabitants he desires to rule.
Now, I really have a problem about how they write about having dominion over or control over these energies. In my experience, it's more of a partnership. You become linked to it. You can communicate with it. And in that communication, you are able to effect your psychokinetic action.
We keep seeing this reoccurring theme of not being afraid. Fear not. Don't have fear when you seek to use these elements and these energies that are available. And that's something that I found in my own training, that when I have an ego-based fear, that it actually affects the outcome. The true self, as Deepak Chopra says, is fearless, unbounded. Moving along, I could continue reading about this. There's quite a long section in this book about this. But what I wanted to relay and what I wanted to pass on is that even though there may be something that you disagree with, or the story just seems too fanciful and superstitious, when it comes to myth and mythology, these are things that are passed down over hundreds of years, maybe even thousands. They didn't even have printing presses up until a while ago, and so they had scribes putting their own inflections and their own interpretations on things. And so you have to sort of look for what the values were, not so much the exact specifics of the stories. And hopefully the information that you're getting is as close to the original story as possible, so as to be useful. Reading more, and what I've gotten from this whole passage is that to be able to use these elements, use these forces, you need to take time and appreciate that element in its purest form, undiluted, and to not have fear when you approach learning these things.